Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Jonas Club Management Master Gen Reporting with General Ledger webinar. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping things. So firstly, the phones are muted. You've probably already noticed that. So we mute them just so that we minimize background noise during these presentations. If you do have any questions for me throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and use the chat box. And you can find that if you have your screen full screened. Up at the top, you should see a little green bar. If you hover over that green bar, there should be a button called Chat. You can also use the Q&A as well. I'll try to answer all questions when they're appropriate, so if I do see them come through the chat and it is relevant to what we are talking about, I will try to answer it. If not, please do not think that I'm ignoring your question. It usually just means that the answer is coming in a future slide, or I will have to get to it at the very end of the presentation. So a copy of this presentation will be available to download in PDF on the jonassupport.com website, and that's where you signed up for this webinar. I'll also have a video posted of this presentation as well. So that means that we are recording, so if you do not wish to have your voice on the recording, please use the chat box for all of your questions. So what to expect from this webinar? Webinars are just to enhance your knowledge of Jonas. They're not to be taken in as replacement for training. We do expect that you have a base knowledge of Jonas software before taking this webinar. It's about 50 minutes of information, and we'll have 10 minutes for question and answer at the end. So what will happen is any questions that come through the chat box or the Q&A, I will address those first, and then I will go ahead and unmute the phones, and you guys will be able to ask any questions face-to-face. So let's get started. Master Gen reporting with general ledger information. You can find the Master Gen tool on your Jonas menu under Administration and then Master Gen. So what this allows you to do is design custom reports for your operation. Today we'll be focusing more on general ledger information, but you can also pull in point of sale, timekeeper data, as well as payroll data. These reports can have security set on them, so you as the creator can set security on your reports that you design on who can edit them, who can view them, and who can print them. So once you have your report set up and you're happy with it, you can go ahead and restrict everyone else from being able to mess around with what's in it. You can also publish reports. So Jonas has a feature called the Report Finder. You can actually publish a report to that finder, so anybody in your club, when they're searching for a report, can find the one that you've designed. There is a drag and drop capability. So what that means is we will have, and you'll see this in future slides, a list of all the available information that you can pull in. So anything from your budgetary information to your general ledger, any kind of date range that you wish to pull, quarterly, yearly, monthly. You can actually drag that and drop it into the cell that you'd like instead of having to go in and edit the properties of each cell. These reports also export to Excel, so you can actually use an Excel workbook and put this report right into it on a different tab. So the types of data that you can use for Master Gen reporting, and these will all pertain to general ledger, you can have actual data, which is your actual financial values that go into your general ledger. You can also have your budget, so you can pull in budget from different periods if you wish. You can pull data based on a date range. You can pull month to date, quarter to date, year to date, as well as historical comparisons. So you can have different columns with different date ranges for your financial information. It also allows you to choose what general ledger account, department, sub-account, and which companies to pull from. So if you have multiple companies, you can actually put in all their information onto one report, as well as if you have a couple different general ledger accounts that make up one total for your club, you can put those together as well. So these are just some ideas of reports that you can create using the Master Generator tool. So typically they're used for summary income statements. These are income statements that pull in all of your departments together on one report. Departmental income statement. So this will pull in your revenues and your cost of goods sold per department, and you can combine certain departments if you wish, or you can have them completely split out, and that's an option as well. Another really common use for Master Gen reporting is a cash flow statement. There is not really a cash flow canned report that comes with Jonas. This is something that needs to be created. So again, on your Jonas menu, you'll be looking at the administration option, and that's on the first menu screen. That'll pop out into the second menu screen, which says Master Gen. And then there's a third one that says Master Gen Design, Master Gen Print, and there are two other options as well. We'll just focus on Design and Print for today. So the Master Gen Design report screen, if you look to the bottom of this slide, it just looks like this. It has, over on the left-hand side, all of the different information you can pull in. In the middle is the actual design screen, and you'll notice it looks a little bit like Excel. And then over to the right, we have more options as to what you can do in terms of layout, setting security, finding and replacing, and changing budget codes. So the first thing that you will see when you're designing a report is the design screen layout. So this will give you what size you want your report to be. So not only will it give you how many rows and how many columns, but also how big you want those columns to be. So how many characters wide. We'll also let you see the data list by module. So that screen will allow you to take a look and see what's available to you in terms of reporting. So within the General Ledger module, what data you can actually pull in, whether it be monthly, yearly, actuals, budget. It lets you go to the security of this report. So who at your club is allowed to edit it, who's allowed to view, who's allowed to print. The publishing option, which allows you to actually publish it to what we call the Jonas Report Finder. And then other people in your club can actually search for this report and print it themselves without having to give them access to the master generator module. There's also an option for a find and replace. So if you have changed a department code or changed a general ledger code, you need to change about 100 cells in the report. If it's a big report and it has a lot of rows, you can use the find and replace instead. There's also the export to Excel option. So these parameters will be you telling Jonas what Excel workbook to export this to. So if you have a workbook of, say, your monthly cash flows, you could export it actually into one big workbook together. And then it also lets you set a footer for the report. So the footer could just be anything you want to print down there, which we have options of page number, dates, who printed the report, what terminal it was printed on, things like that. We will go over these screens in a little bit more detail, though. So the first one we're going to talk about is report size. So the report size screen can be changed at any time, but it will pop up when you initially set up the report. Basically, what it's asking you for is what's the name of this report, how big is it, so how many rows and how many columns are you going to need on this report. You can have up to 999 rows and up to 52 columns. Then it will ask you whether or not you want the page numbering to print on that report. And also it will ask you about any hidden columns. So hidden columns, we usually just use these for calculations. So what that means is you might have a calculation that combines 2 or 3 different columns or different types of data into one cell. You only really want to see the end result or that calculation. You can actually hide columns so that they're there so that the report generates them so they can be used for the calculation, but they're not actually being shown because the columns are a 0 width or you cannot see them, they're hidden. So this is just asking whether or not you want to see those columns or not. So this is what the report size screen looks like. So you can see it's asking me for my company code first, my code of the design. So just like everything else in Jonas, it does have to have a code and a description. And then it's asking me for the number of columns and the number of rows. And then you can see down just below there, you have each column and how wide it is. So that's how many characters wide. If you're going to be using these columns for big descriptions, you want to make it a little bit bigger, such as column A. We have 30 characters there. B, C, D, and further down, we were thinking that those will be financial values, so they're a little bit smaller, only 15 characters. And then if you're looking further down, I'll just ask you for the heading. So what do you want to print as the header for this report or the title? Show 0 width columns on grid. So what that means is if you're using a 0 width column, do you want it to actually show on the grid so you can edit it? Typically that's going to be checked off so that you can use that for your calculations. So the next thing on the report setup screen that we want to talk about is data lists. So these are the different pieces of information that you can pull into your report. They are separated by module, and then there is a miscellaneous up at the top. And they're grouped into different types of data. So since this webinar is mostly focusing on general ledger, that's mostly what we'll talk about today. You can see under GL financial data, we have the actual date range. So what that means is give you my actual financial information for the date range that I put in. If you use this one, it will actually pop up every time you print this report and ask you for the date range of each column. You can also pull in information monthly, year-to-date, budget, and quarterly. So for the GL data, within each of those budget, monthly, year-to-date, quarter-to-date, you have the choice of using the actual data, so the actual financial information that was in those GLs, the average, or the budget information. You can also pull in, and these you'll find under the miscellaneous tab, an alphanumeric cell. So what that is, it's just text, it's just a description or a number that you want to pull in. And then there's also a calculation. So we'll go over some examples of calculations, but basically just so that you know it is very similar to Excel, the calculation will use the cell number and column. So if I'm adding up on cell C5, all of the above columns, I would do C1 plus C2 plus C3, etc. Very similar to Excel. So you can have alphanumeric, you can have numbers, you can have calculations, and then you can also have GL data as your different cell types. So once you've selected your data type, so off of that list that we saw before, all of the ones that were separated by module, you'll select that, drag it into the cell you wish to display that information, and that will actually open up and ask you for more information, so basically your criteria. So some information you'll want to know before you start your report is the general ledger financial reporting line numbers. So basically, on your actual financials that you're printing from Jonas right now, where does each general ledger report to? So if you're going to make sure that this report is accurate by tying it into your financials, you need to make sure that those general ledgers are all pointing to the same line, because you can have multiple general ledger accounts pointing to one line in your Jonas financial statements. What you'll also want to know is the design layout. So both of these things can be found under the general ledger design module. You just want to make sure that you have an idea of how you want your report to look and if it's going to actually tie into your financial statement, so you have something to kind of check it out and make sure that it's reporting the accurate information. So with that information in mind, this is what it will look like when you drag in GL financial data to a cell. So you can see this is my parameter screen. The type of cell that I've chosen is GL financial data. The type of data that I've chosen is code AMTY, and there are multiple codes that you can select. AMTY means actual month this year. So this is going to give me my monthly information. The next one down, you can see that there is a if budget use. So what that means is if you've chosen a budget type of data, you'll have to choose what budget code to use. So for anybody that's used the budgeting feature in Jonas, you know that each budget is saved under a code. Then it will ask you what company to pick up, what general ledger accounts to pick up, and you can select multiple or a range here, what departments, what sub-account, and then the print format. So the print format is basically, do you like your negatives to be a negative sign or in brackets? Do you want to see decimals? Do you not want to see decimals? Is this column maybe a percentage and you want the percent sign to print? It's basically just formatting. It doesn't change your data at all. So these slides are just kind of going over what I just said. So it's just telling you all the different options for filtering. We have our type of data, our budgetary information, companies to pick up, GL accounts, departments, sub-accounts, and the print format. So you will have to do this for each cell on your report. The good news is you can copy and paste. So if everything on here is correct except for maybe one piece of information, you can copy and paste this cell into another one and then just change that one piece of information. Just helps you speed up the process of creating these reports. So moving on into if we had chosen an alphanumeric cell. So this is what the alphanumeric cell setup screen looks like. Very different from what we saw in the previous slide for our GL financial data. Alphanumeric, all it asks you for is a description, and if we want to write justify. So when you're using these alphanumeric cells, just keep in mind what size you set that column to be in the initial setup screen. You want to make sure that you keep your description within that size. You also have the option to write justify, so the default, of course, is left. If this cell is super big, maybe it's 45 characters long, you might want to write justify the description so that it prints closer to your data. It's a little bit easier to read. The next option that you can have is a number cell, and the number entered will stay static, so it will always be this number, but it can be used in calculations. So the number that we've chosen here is 7. That could actually be a percentage. So what you can do is hard code your report to always print this number, and then do your calculations based on the GL information printed above it, maybe times this number. That way you always have that hard-coded and it's there, but the output of the calculation that you're using this number for will change based on what your actual GL information is. So the number cell is really just a number cell that you can use for calculations. You would not want to use the number cell, or you would not want to put numbers in the alphanumeric cell. Then you also get your option of your print format. So this is when you're choosing whether or not to show decimal places, how you want your negatives to look, and if you want the percentage sign to print. So the last type of information that we can pull into the report is a calculation cell. So it's the first line here is just telling you to use the plus, the minus, the divider, or the multiplier for simple formulas. So again, very similar to Excel. If you look down in the screenshot here, this is what the calculation setup screen looks like. You can see that all we're doing here is dividing cell B13, so the 13th row of column B, by B15, the 15th row of column B. You can also use the maximum, the minimum, the true, and the use, as well as there are options to do sum. So if you need the sum of a really long row, you can just do sum, say C5 ... C99. Again, you get to choose your print format, and you can save the result as a different code, and that code can actually be used to be displayed later on in the report. So from the setup screen, once you've decided what information you're going to pull into your report, you'll want to set some security on your report so that nobody can go in and change it on you. So this is what the report security screen looks like. Of course, it'll ask you for your club. It'll ask you what report we're talking about. And then you can choose a user ID. You can actually see in this list that all user IDs have full access to this report. What we can do now is start to restrict certain people. So maybe what we'll have to do is choose the user ID. All of these checkboxes will actually open up once you've chosen a user ID, and you can say whether or not this person has full access, whether they have just print access, they can save as. So what that means is they can copy the report and start creating their own, but they can't edit the original. They can modify the report, so that means that they can actually change what the report is displaying. They can view it, so they can look at it, see how you've designed it, but they can't make any changes. They can delete it, and then they can also edit the security. So you want to make sure that if there are people on your staff who you want to be able to print it but maybe not want to be able to edit it, you restrict those people so that you don't end up with a report that nobody really knows what happened to it or how it changed. From this screen, and I'll show you that again, it's over on the right-hand side, the Publish Design button. You can actually publish this report to people. So if you don't want people to have access to the General Ledger module at all, but you want them to see your report, you can actually publish it so that they can print it from other places in Jonas. So this is what the publish screen looks like. You can actually choose which users you want to publish it to, or you can choose all users. You can say that this report cannot be deleted. And then you can actually set your different descriptions on this report. So what that means is these descriptions are what the user will be searching. So if I'm searching for this report, I'm looking for my banquet profit and loss. I want to make sure that those words are actually in the description so that I can find it later on. You can set additional keywords for this search as well as giving this image a picture. So you can actually set this report up with a picture for banquet profit and loss if you think that will help your staff remember. Once you've set all of your parameters, so which users you're going to publish to, how you want them to be able to search it, you can just hit the word publish, and you can see that over on the right-hand side. And then they'll be able to find the report in the Jonas Report Finder. So you can see in the list of reports, I have administration, Master Gen, and then these are all the reports that I have published for my staff to be able to read. The next option is the find and replace option. So this is if we need to change something for multiple cells. What we can do is the first thing we need to do under change type is set what cells we need to change. So this is saying from column A1 to column O30. So that looks like it's going to be the whole report that we need to change. We want to change every instance of whatever we're trying to change, the whole report. If I wanted to do, say, just column C, out to you from column C1 to column C30. So make sure that you set that first. And then you can actually search and replace specific cell types. So the first option is alphanumeric description. So if maybe we're changing the word banquet to events, we're just changing the way the club describes their banquets, we would search alphanumeric description banquet to the word events, replace with events. If you change the type of cell, so if you change that where it says alphanumeric description to general ledger financial data, it actually gives you more options. So you can replace the company code if your club has gone to a new company. You can replace the general ledger number if maybe you retired some GLs. You can replace the department, and you can actually also replace the budget code. Once you have your find what and your replace with filled in, you'll click on find all at the bottom. And what it will do is it'll highlight in blue all of the cells that are set to be changed. Have a quick look at them, make sure it's the ones that you want to change, and then you can click on replace all highlighted cells. The next option on the setup screen is Excel exports. So what you'll do is you'll create an Excel document. You'll note the tab name at the bottom. So once you've created this workbook, you'll probably want to name each tab, and then give a tab that's called data or Jonas data. Enter the workbook and tab name into the Excel button. So this is actually on the MasterGen report setup screen. You'll enter in the workbook name and the tab name, and then hit OK. Every time that you print that report or view it, it will actually just open in Excel in that workbook that you've just described. You can keep actually a big workbook every month. Just go in and print your report into that tab, rename the tab, and then keep going with it. And you'll actually, at the end of the year, have a big workbook with all of your financial data. Another option that you can use in Excel is the footer information, and this will work not only in Excel, but when you print the report as well. So it's just what do you want to see at the bottom of this report, and it gives you some options here of what you can show, which is the date and time the report was printed, what terminal it was printed on, and by who, what user ID. You can also give page numbers as well as the report code. So you know when you're looking at the printed copy of this report exactly where it came from and at what point in time. So maybe if something looks a little bit off to you, you'll know, okay, maybe, we made some changes after this report was printed. You can look at the date and time and say, yes, okay, so that's why we've corrected this already. So what is in the cells? So the default display of the cells will show what type of data is in use. You can see on this report we have a couple of alphanumerics where it says month actual, month budget. We have some GL data, and we also have some calculations. So if you hover over the cell, you can actually get a little bit more information. So on cell A4, which is what is being hovered over right now, we have this cell is going to show me an actual date range in the format of D2R, which means that the R basically tells me that this presentation is going to be reversed, so it's a revenue. Because revenues go in as a negative, you do have to reverse their presentation in reports. To figure out what's in every single cell without having to hover over each one or go into each one individually, you can actually click on Report Layout, and it will pop it out in an Excel workbook. Looks just like this. So you can see my alphanumerics are in column A2. In column B2, I'm looking at GL financial data, the code AYLM, which is actual year-to-date last month. What GL accounts are being used, so I want to see every GL account in between 1,000 and 1040. And my print format is D2. You can also drag and drop and cut and paste, and there are some additional tools by using the right button click as well. So once you've initially set up a cell and you need to go back in, you can actually right-click on it and hit Properties. If you need to do any editing, you can right-click, hit Copy, Paste, Delete, or Insert. And there's also the F1 Help, so that just kind of gives you some tips and tricks on how to build your report. When you use the copy and paste, it will actually recalculate your formulas. So if you have a couple of calculations that are doing a sum of certain cells, you insert or delete a cell or a row, that calculation will actually edit itself, as well as if you have a calculation that's adding up a whole row and you copy it to the next row, it will edit itself to actually do the next row as well, so you don't have to worry about re-entering all of your calculations when you're moving things around. Down at the bottom of the report setup screen, there are a couple buttons as well. There's a preview, there's a delete, there's a save, and a save as. Save as will copy an existing report into a new one. Save will just save as you go. Please remember to save as you go when you're building reports, because it would be horrible to build this big, beautiful report and then maybe forget to save it. This is an example of a summary income statement. You can see we have our month actual, we have our month budget, we have some revenues, we have our year-to-date actual, and we have our year-to-date budget. And it looks like we're also using column D and B for some variance calculations. Column E would be an example of the alphanumeric. This is an example of a departmental income statement. So you can see up at the top we have a star with the date TA. What that means is I know that column B is using the date range. So when I print this report, it's actually going to pop up and ask me what date range we want to see on this report. You can see we have calculations down at the bottom as well, just adding up the merchandise, the cost of goods, and the labor to give us our net profit or loss. This is an example of a cash flow statement. So we have the bank balance at the beginning. We have any ins and outs based on accounts receivable and accounts payable. We have some net cash from operations, and then you can see we flip back from GL data to calculations until we get our net cash change. So that is all of the material that I have today in this presentation. I did not see any questions come through the chat or the Q&A, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute all the phone lines now. Just give it a second to kick in, and you'll be able to ask me any questions you might have.
Line unmuted.
Okay, it looks like everybody should be unmuted now if anyone has any questions for me at this time. No questions? Okay, well, I will stay on the line for the next couple minutes just in case we do have anyone who is feeling a little bit shy. A video of this presentation will be available at jonassupport.com under Resources and Training. And you can also get a PDF copy of these slides under Resources and Training as well, where you signed up for this webinar. That address is posted now on the slideshow, and you can also send any feedback to training@jonasclub.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.